I had a thought, and then I did some research so that I could actually get where the numbers work pretty well, as far as it being like a really spot on, valid analogy.
Okay.
So imagine that a group of violent gang members from Philadelphia left Philadelphia, killed and kidnapped a bunch of people, and then fled back to Philadelphia. And in response, the American military bombed Philadelphia.
Okay.
That's
Yes.
what happened. The
Okay.
population numbers
So,
work out. The square mileage of Philadelphia matches Gaza. Like, that's what happened. And that's
oh
even
my
without
goodness.
that's without including any of the things that put more onto Israel as far as like moral culpability. Like, I've left all of those things out. And even not having to talk about that, like, hey, they did this for no good reason. They just ran out because they're selfish, horrible people, killed a bunch of people, kidnapped some to use as hostages. In response, we're just going to shell the place that they live. We're going to bomb their families and their friends and their neighbors and that one guy they bought a falafel from one time.
Yeah, I mean, and like as you say, I can continue the analogy, be accurate, and make the picture worse. For example, it would be accurate to extend your point to say that that gang was in charge of Philadelphia. And the reason that gang was in charge of Philadelphia was because the United States government made sure it was the United States Army, to keep it to the parties you named, decided it should be that way and worked actively against the other or the alternative government that was available in Philadelphia and undermined them so that the gang would be in charge. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
it's like
And
it,
pretend that the U.S. Army had previously set up a secure fence around Philadelphia and controlled the inflow of food and water and electricity and information for, I don't know, 30 or 40 years.
yeah, I mean to step out of analogy and speak more bluntly, that is the part of all this that I end up being the most disturbed by on the side of people who I think are in good faith arguing for Israel is that they tend to discredit Israel's bad actions prior to October 7th, treat them as sort of like a noble democracy amongst the rabble, sort of. It's a very sort of romantic approach to the whole thing. And I don't think it's disingenuous, but I do think it's dangerous. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I, it's because, listen, intelligent people can disagree, but you and I are of the opinion that it is fair to call the Gaza Strip an open air prison. And also, like most of the world, to consider Israel an apartheid state. And I don't want to get into the justifications and arguments. That means what it means. And to then act surprised that the people of Gaza want to like not stay with the status quo and violently don't want to stay with the status quo is sort of insane, right? Of course they don't.
Yeah,
Like
but it's not even the people of Gaza who violently don't want it is just a small subset that violently don't want to stay with the
that's
status
true.
quo.
That's
Um,
they probably most of them probably violently don't want to, but they won't actually use violence to bring it about.
mhm.
But yeah, it's an important. I was lazy with the words. Like I shouldn't use that word in this context to mean anything other than physical violence because of how wrought the
Because
whole
physical
thing is.
violence is very relevant in this discussion and should be
Yeah,
should
Yeah.
be sequestered from the turn of phrase violently against something, meaning really, really, really against it.
Hmm. So yeah, man, I think your analogy is better, but I keep coming back to like the prison riot. You know what I mean? If we had a prison riot and like a subset of prisoners got out of prison, did some really dark shit, awful things, and then all of the prison guards got together, went in, and murdered half the people in the
Yeah,
prison,
but
most of
it's
which had nothing to do with the riot. They We wouldn't be okay. Like we
yeah,
wouldn't
but
be like,
and
the prison guards had a point.
it's even worse than that though.
Yeah,
I mean there are so many emotional emotionally invested groups that are kind of staked on slightly different hills with this. That I crafted an analogy with the Philadelphia thing that was trying to get to the people who I really see as the problem. The everything Israel's doing is perfectly fine people.
yeah,
Um, so I didn't, I wanted to really hit on the fact that like you have these relations that are being horribly hurt that are sometimes not even first degree relations to the people who did the bad thing.
yeah,
So that that's why I wanted to and then I don't have to convince anyone that Gaza is like a prison because like I'm
yeah,
going to skip all that and just say listen, this group of bad people from the city like or from this area, you know, came out and did a horrible thing. And as a result, you are blowing up hospitals because they might be there. I mean, that's ridiculous, even if I don't include any of the circumstances that maybe mitigate what the bad act was to start with. I don't have to make what they did understandable or give you any level of empathy for them to just go like, yes, okay, the gang, in this case Hamas, horrible, irredeemably bad. I'm not even going to talk about whether or not, where their motivation comes from or how justifiable it may be. We'll just go with horrible, 100% bad,
yeah. Because no matter
100%
how
their own fault.
justifiable, no matter how justifiable their anger is, what they did is unjustifiable. So it doesn't matter. Like I don't. They're not
Well,
the
it doesn't
ones that
have
would.
to matter. I think it does matter, but it doesn't have to matter in order to look at
Fair
what
enough.
Israel is doing and go, that is too far. Because that's what I mean.
Yeah,
They're dropping shells on 4-year-olds at home. That's not a
yeah,
justifiable response to the stimulus that you received. And you're right. Like there's the other way, another way to look at it is like a prison riot. But then it's not even like if
well, it's
you're
audience, right? We're dealing with
yeah.
like how we want to tell the story. You're trying to
Um,
convince people your story works much better. If I were telling my version of the story, it would be to an audience of people who already agreed with me in hopes of like riling them up
yeah,
to do something.
but then you didn't even go far enough with it. Like you softened it in
Yeah,
another way because you had the guards go in and brutalize prisoners. So arguably all
yeah,
people who convicted of having done something bad, which theoretically, in an ideal world means they actually did something criminal.
yeah.
But that's not what's
But the
happening.
audience,
Like you
yeah,
had a
the
prison
audience I would
riot.
use, yeah. But
They
the
came
audience I
out.
would use that story with would sympathize with the prisoners because that's sort of one of their
Yeah, but
jams.
that's what I'm
But
saying.
yeah,
You didn't. Then you didn't actually accurately portray the picture for them
yeah.
because it's the prisoners broke out of the prison, did horrible things, and in response, the government bombed their families and friends in the neighborhoods they came from. Like the guards went in
Uh,
and brutalized their friends and family and people they knew and people who were from their neighborhood, not just the prisoners.
yeah.
Which is, I mean, already, like from an American moral sensibility, the guardians of right that we claim to be as a society, like just going in and brutalizing all of the prisoners because some of them rioted is already like unconscionable. You're like that we couldn't possibly permit that, aside from a
It's literally
few
wait.
very wing people.
It's it's literally a moral choice we've already made because they used to do it that way, right?
Yeah,
Like so, like it was that way, and we went, "Whoa, okay, that's clearly not fucking cool." So let's take a step. Um,
Well, and I mean,
yeah, it is fascinating, but I mean, what's amazing is like we're making these analogies, right? And like in varying degrees, we're both very clever, you know. Um, and and the thing is, our immediate reaction to both of us to the other is, yeah, it's still not bad enough. It's still
yeah.
they're still not being crappy enough. Like that's where we are with this. Like that's how
You,
bad. Like and listen to clarify, because I mean, listen, we're recording this, so I'm going to say something. For people who are right now getting very mad at us, we're not anti-Semitic, and being anti a nation isn't being anti an ethnicity or a race or a religion. Israel's government is acting shitty. That's I would be consistent if any other government acted like this. I think Russia's acting super shitty right now in Ukraine because they just went into other people's land and started messing them up, and that's not cool. And also, I want to make a point that you know there are issues with the formation of Israel, but it's there, and I think it should be there. I think it has a right to be there, and I think it has a right to defend itself, and that's not what's happening right now. And I'm comfortable saying that I think there's some really messed up stuff with the formation of that country, and that it can still be a great country because I think the same thing about the United States. There
I
are
mean,
some really messed up, horrible things at the start of our nation. I think it can be a great place. Like I
I
don't think
think
that means it can't.
if you look at history, I doubt there are many countries that don't include a
Some
functional
super shitty
horror
stuff at the start.
in
Yeah.
order to form the country. Like somebody was wiped out, probably. Um,
What a wonderful moment where we were sort of talking over each other that explains the difference between us when we're talking about these things. I said super shitty stuff, and you said a functional horror, and that kind of just describes it, people. All right, that's me and Kyle in our communication styles most of the time.